Every night he would enter her room after midnight. The truth turned Christmas into a living hell. And if you have ever felt like something terrible is happening right under your own roof, but everyone makes you think you're going crazy, today I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if you, for even a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It's going to help me keep venting. My name is Carol Miller. I'm 63 years old, and I've lived in this town since I was born. I thought I knew my family. I thought that after 35 years of marriage to Robert, I could trust him. I thought our daughter, Emily, was the light of our lives, and that our son-in-law, Chris, was a good man. I was wrong about everything. It was December of last year. The air smelled of eggnog and gingerbread when I started noticing strange things. Robert, my husband, had inexplicably changed his nighttime habits. For decades, we slept together in our master bedroom in this vintage craftsman home in the historic Maplewood neighborhood that we bought when we were young, investing every dime we earned working at the downtown produce market. But since November, Robert had started getting up every night around 12:30. At first, I thought it was prostate issues. At his age, 67, it was normal. But when I asked him in the morning, he denied having gotten up at all. "You're imagining things, Carol. I slept like a baby all night," he'd tell me while spreading cream cheese on his bagel, without even looking me in the eyes. One night in mid-December, I decided to pretend I was asleep. I closed my eyes and waited. Right on schedule, at 12:37 a.m., I felt Robert carefully getting up, trying not to make a sound. His bare feet crossed our cold tiled floor. He opened the door with the delicacy of someone who doesn't want to be discovered and stepped into the hall. My heart started beating so loudly I thought it would give me away. I got up stealthily and walked to the slightly ajar door. From there, I could see the hallway that connected the 3 bedrooms in our house. Ours, Emily, and Chris's, and the small one where my 11-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, slept. Robert went straight toward our daughter's room. He tapped softly on the door. She opened it. He stepped inside, and he closed it behind him. A cold sweat covered my entire body. What was my husband doing in our daughter's room at that hour? Chris, her husband, worked as a night security guard for a local company and wouldn't be back until 6 in the morning. Emily was alone in there. I returned to bed trembling, but I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house startled me. Was it normal for a father-in-law to visit his daughter-in-law in the middle of the night when her husband was gone? Was it normal for my husband to lie to me about these nocturnal meetings? The next morning, during breakfast, I tried to approach the subject subtly. "Robert, I heard you get up last night. Is everything okay?" He was quietly chewing his scrambled eggs and hash browns while reading the news on his phone. "I didn't get up, Carol. I told you I didn't. But I saw you leave the room. You're losing it, old woman. Maybe you're getting Alzheimer's." Emily, who was packing Sarah's lunch for school, turned toward me with an expression I couldn't quite place. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't worry. It was annoyance? "Mom, don't start with the paranoia again. Dad didn't get up last night. I was up late watching Netflix and didn't hear a thing." Sarah, my granddaughter, nibbled her cinnamon roll without participating in the conversation. But I saw her look at all of us with a strange expression in her eyes, as if she knew something she couldn't say. "Sarah, sweetie, did you hear anything last night?" I asked her directly. The girl opened her mouth to answer, but Emily interrupted her sharply. "Leave the kid alone, Mom. Don't drag her into your crazy theories." For the next few days, the pattern repeated religiously. Robert would get up between 12:30 and 1 a.m., walk to Emily's room, and return about an hour later. I know because one night I stayed awake, timing his movements with the clock on the nightstand that had been my mother's. I decided to confront Emily directly. It was December 22nd. We were in the kitchen preparing the stuffing and mixing the cranberry sauce for Christmas dinner, a tradition we had maintained since she got married. The aroma of rosemary, sage, and baking crust filled the whole house, mixing with the scent of the pine trees we had put up in the living room. "Honey, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Emily continued spreading the dough over the cutting board without looking at me. "Tell me, Mom, why does your dad go to your room every night when Chris isn't here?" Her hands stopped. Slowly, she lifted her face to me. In her eyes, I saw something that chilled my blood. It wasn't surprise. It was fear. And then, very quickly, that fear morphed into rage. "What are you talking about, Mom? Dad doesn't come to my room." "Emily, I've seen him. Every night. He leaves our room, goes to yours, goes in, and leaves about an hour later." "You're crazy, Mom. Completely insane." But her voice was trembling. And for the first time in weeks, I noticed that my daughter, my girl whom I had raised with so much love, had deep circles under her eyes and had lost weight. Her face, which had always been round and smiling, looked drawn and tense. "Emily, what is going on in this house? Tell me the truth." She threw the spoon onto the counter with such force that it splattered sauce everywhere. "Stop it, Mom. You're making things up. Dad doesn't come to my room, and even if he did, it's none of your business." "How is it not my business? I'm his wife. I'm your mother. And I'm an adult woman. I'm 32 years old. I don't need you to babysit me." That night, December 22nd, I stayed awake again. Robert got up at 12:45 a.m., but this time, instead of staying in bed, I decided to follow him. Barefoot, I walked down the hall until I reached Emily's door. I heard voices. First Robert's, in a tone I had never heard him use in 35 years of marriage. It was soft, persuasive, almost seductive. "You know this is what you need, Emily. Don't pretend you don't like it." Then I heard my daughter's voice, broken, pleading. "Please, Dad, no more. Chris is going to suspect if I keep being this nervous." "Chris won't suspect a thing. He's a complete idiot. And besides, you know what will happen if you tell anyone." My world collapsed at that moment. My legs trembled so much that I had to lean against the wall not to fall. My husband, the man with whom I had built a life, a family, a home, was abusing our daughter. And she knew it. She allowed it. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I could do nothing but stand there, paralyzed by the horror, while I heard sounds no mother should ever hear. When Robert finally came out of the room, he almost caught me. I managed to hide in the guest bathroom, praying he hadn't seen me. He walked calmly back to our room, as if nothing had happened. That was the night I understood I no longer knew my family. That this year's Christmas would be the worst of my entire life, and that I had to decide whether I was going to continue pretending I didn't know anything, or if I was going to face a truth that could destroy everything I had built over decades. Christmas Eve was 2 days away, and I had just discovered I lived in a house where the worst of sins was being committed. What does a 63-year-old woman do when she discovers her reality was a lie? How do you face a monster that sleeps in your bed every night? I didn't know then, but I was about to find out. The following days were a silent ordeal. Every family meal had become a stage play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. Robert acted like the perfect father and grandfather, pouring Emily more coffee at breakfast, asking Sarah about her school assignments, commenting on the news as if nothing had changed. But I could no longer stop noticing the details I had previously overlooked. The way Emily avoided eye contact with her father during the day, but obeyed him immediately when he asked her for anything. The way Robert placed his hand on my daughter's shoulder when he walked behind her chair, and how she visibly tensed at the touch. The awkward silences that stretched too long when Sarah asked innocent questions about why Mom seemed so tired lately. On December 23rd, while Emily had gone downtown to buy the last Christmas presents, I decided to talk to Robert directly. We were alone in the living room, he watching the Sunday football game on TV, and I pretending to knit a scarf for Sarah. The Christmas tree lights twinkled with colors that now seemed obscene to me, as if the holiday cheer were a cruel mockery of what I was discovering. "Robert, we need to talk." He kept watching the screen, drinking bourbon straight from the bottle. "About what, Carol? About what happens at night. About what you do when you get up." This time he did turn toward me. His expression showed neither surprise nor guilt. It was a cold, calculating look, as if he were evaluating how much I knew and how to handle the situation. "I don't know what you're talking about. I know you go to Emily's room every night. I know she doesn't want you to. And I know you're threatening her so she won't tell anyone." Robert slammed the bottle of bourbon onto the coffee table. He got up from the armchair and walked toward where I was sitting. His proximity intimidated me in a way I had never experienced in over 3 decades of marriage. "Carol, listen to me very carefully. You have no idea what you're saying. and I suggest you stop making up crazy stories before this becomes a problem for everyone in this house. A problem for whom, Robert? For you? For Sarah. The two words fell like a death sentence. My granddaughter. My beloved Sarah, 11 years old, with her perpetually perfect braids and her laugh that filled the whole house when she came home from school. I understood the threat immediately. You wouldn't dare. Emily understands very well that some things are better kept in the family, that there are certain traditions that pass from generation to generation, and if someone tries to change those traditions, the consequences can be very painful for the most innocent people. I was paralyzed. Robert was not only abusing our daughter, but he was threatening her by saying he would hurt Sarah if she spoke up. And now he was giving the same threat to me. You're a monster, I whispered. I'm the man who has supported this family for 35 years. I'm the one who pays the electricity, the water, the food you eat. I'm the one who has the contacts at the bank where we keep our savings, who knows the local police, who decides what happens and what doesn't happen in this house. He stepped closer, so close I could smell the alcohol on his breath mixed with the aroma of his cheap cologne. And you are an old woman who has nowhere to go if I decide you no longer live here. A woman who never worked, who has no assets in her name, who depends completely on me to survive. So I suggest you continue being the quiet and obedient wife you've always been. When Emily returned that afternoon with the bags of gifts, her eyes were swollen as if she had been crying. She went straight to her room without greeting anyone. Sarah, who was doing homework at the dining room table, looked up worriedly. Grandma Carol, why is Mom always sad around Christmas? My granddaughter's question broke my heart. How could I explain to an 11-year-old girl that her family world was a lie? How could I protect her from a truth that could destroy her innocence forever? Sometimes adults have worries that children don't understand, sweetheart. But Mom cries a lot. And Grandpa Robert is always in a bad mood. And you look very sad lately, too. Sarah was more perceptive than any of us had imagined. She had noticed something was wrong in the family, even if she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. You know what, Sarah? Come here. I took her hand and led her to my room. I closed the door and we sat on my bed, the same one where I had slept with Robert for decades, where we had conceived Emily, where we had planned our future when we were young and believed in love. Sweetheart, I want to ask you something very important, and I need you to tell me the truth. The girl nodded with those big, trusting eyes that only children who still believe adults will always protect them have. Has Grandpa Robert ever done anything that makes you feel uncomfortable? Has he touched you in a way you don't like? Has he told you not to tell anyone about something you did together? Sarah frowned, thinking carefully before answering. No, Grandma. Grandpa hardly ever talks to me. But what, sweetheart? Sometimes I hear noises at night, like someone is crying, and once I saw Grandpa coming out of Mom's room really late. What else have you seen, Sarah? Mom has bruises on her arms. She hides them with long sleeves, but I saw them when she was taking a shower. And once I heard her talking on the phone with someone, telling them she couldn't take it anymore, that she wanted to die. My world completely collapsed. Emily was not only being sexually abused by her father, but she was also being physically hit. And my granddaughter, my little Sarah, had been a silent witness to all this horror. Sarah, sweetheart, everything you're telling me is very important. But I need you not to tell anyone that we talked about this for now, okay? Not even Mom? Especially not Mom. At least not yet. Grandma is going to fix all this, but I need time to figure out how to do it the right way. That night was Christmas Eve. Traditionally, the whole family gathered for dinner. Roast ham, hot spiced cider, and prime rib. Emily had invited Chris to have dinner with us before he left for work, and my sister Lisa and her husband Joe were also coming. But when the guests arrived, the tension in the house was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Robert acted like the perfect patriarch, serving glasses of scotch and telling jokes, but I could see how Emily flinched every time he came near her. Chris, poor man, seemed completely oblivious to what was happening in his own home. During dinner, while everyone talked about plans for the new year and commented on how delicious the food was, I couldn't stop observing my family as if seeing them for the first time. My sister Lisa praised Robert for being such a good father and grandfather. Chris thanked his father-in-law for taking such good care of Emily, while he worked nights. Sarah ate in silence, with that premature maturity that children who have seen too much develop. When Chris left for work around 10 o'clock, and Lisa and Joe said goodbye shortly after, the house settled back into that oppressive atmosphere that had become normal. Robert poured himself another glass of scotch and sat in his favorite armchair to watch TV. "Emily, come here," he shouted from the living room. My daughter, who was clearing the dinner plates, froze for a moment. Then she walked toward her father with slow steps, like a condemned woman walking to the gallows. "Sit here with me." "It's Christmas Eve." Emily sat on the sofa next to his, keeping the maximum possible distance. Robert placed his hand on my daughter's leg and left it there, possessive, threatening. "We're a very close family, aren't we, Emily?" "Yes, Dad." "And close families look out for each other, don't they? They keep the secrets that need to be kept?" "Yes, Dad." "Good. Because tonight is going to be very special for the two of us." In that moment, I knew I couldn't remain a silent spectator. I couldn't allow Robert to continue destroying my daughter one more night, but I also knew that confronting him directly could put Sarah in danger. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it tonight. At 11 o'clock, when Sarah had gone to sleep and the house was silent, I decided I couldn't stand idly by. Robert had turned up the volume on the TV to drown out any noise that might come from Emily's room. It was his way of telling me he knew I knew, but that I didn't care enough to do anything about it. I got up from the sofa where I had been pretending to watch the Christmas movies and walked toward the kitchen. I needed to think clearly, and I had always found peace in that space where I had cooked for my family for so many years. I put water on to boil for some herbal tea, but my hands were shaking so much I almost knocked over the kettle. While waiting for the water to boil, I opened one of the drawers where I kept the important house documents. There were all the papers Robert controlled: the deed to the house, the bank statements, the insurance policies. Everything was in his name. Everything. Even the house we had bought with the money I had inherited from my parents when they died. In 1987, when we bought this property in Maplewood, I had the capital from the sale of my parents' house, but Robert convinced me to put everything in his name for tax purposes, because he understood those matters better, and because it would be easier to get loans in the future. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, the father of my daughter, the man who was supposed to love and protect me until death. Now I realized that decision had made me a prisoner. With no property in my name, no independent bank accounts, no job that gave me economic autonomy, I was completely at the mercy of a man who turned out to be a predator. I checked more papers. Robert had made several investments in recent years without consulting me. He had bought stock in mining companies, invested money in a friend's business that turned out to be a pyramid scheme, and had even lost a considerable amount speculating with Bitcoin the previous year. Our savings, which should have been enough for a dignified retirement, had been significantly depleted by his impulsive decisions. But the most disturbing thing was a series of cash withdrawals he had been making monthly for the past 2 years. Large amounts, always on a Friday afternoon, always from the same bank branch. What was Robert spending so much cash on? Why did he need those transactions to be untraceable? The water boiled, but I no longer felt like having tea. I felt like vomiting. My husband was not only an abuser, but also a bad financial manager who was squandering our assets on activities he preferred to keep secret. I heard footsteps in the hall. It was Robert, heading toward Emily's room. I looked at the stove clock. 12:43 a.m. Punctual as always for his appointment with horror. This time I decided to be bolder. Instead of staying in the kitchen pretending I didn't know what was happening, I walked into the hallway. I stood there, not hiding, waiting for Robert to see me when he came out of my daughter's room. An hour and 15 minutes later, the door opened. Robert appeared in the doorway, adjusting his pajama pants. When he saw me standing there, looking directly at him, he showed neither surprise nor shame, just annoyance. "What are you doing standing there like a ghost, Carol?" "Waiting for you." "For what?" "To tell you it's over. This is all ending tonight." Robert walked toward me with that smile that now gave me chills, the same one he used when he thought he had everything under control. "Oh yeah? And what are you going to do, Carol? Who are you going to tell? The police? Your sister Lisa? Father Michael at the parish?" He stopped right in front of me. invading my personal space in an intimidating way. Go ahead. Tell them. Tell them that respectable Robert Miller, who has been an honest dealer at the downtown produce market for 40 years, who has been a church usher, who has never been in trouble with anyone, is abusing his own daughter. Let's see who believes you. His words hit me like slaps because I knew he was right. Robert had built an impeccable reputation in the community. He was liked by the neighbors, respected by the market dealers, appreciated by the priest. Who was going to believe the accusations of a housewife with no concrete evidence against such a respectable man? Besides, he continued, do you really want the whole town to know what goes on in your family? Do you want Sarah to grow up with the stigma of coming from a family of degenerates? Do you want Chris to leave Emily when he finds out what's been happening? Because believe me, Carol, men usually don't stay with women who have been, shall we say, tarnished. Emily is not at fault for anything. Oh, isn't she? Are you sure about that? Robert's tone changed, becoming crueler, more sadistic. Are you sure your daughter doesn't enjoy our nightly meetings? Are you sure she isn't the one who seeks me out, who seduces me, who begs me to come to her room? You are sick. I'm telling the truth. Emily is an adult woman, Carol. A woman who has been married for years to a man who works nights and doesn't give her the attention she needs. A woman who found in her father the affection and passion she doesn't find in her husband. Robert's words were like pure venom. He was trying to convince me that my daughter was a willing accomplice to her own abuse, that I was the only one who saw evil where there was only family love. Tomorrow is Christmas, Carol, a day of peace, family, and forgiveness. I suggest you think very carefully about whether you want to ruin this beautiful celebration with your sick fantasies. Robert headed toward our room, but before entering, he turned back to me one last time. And also think about Sarah. Think about what could happen to such a sweet, innocent girl if her grandmother decides to create unnecessary problems in this family. The threat couldn't have been clearer. If I spoke, Sarah would be his next victim. I couldn't sleep a minute that night. I sat in the living room, looking at the Christmas tree that now seemed grotesque to me, thinking about all the previous Christmases we had celebrated in this same house. When had the abuse started? Had there been signs I had ignored? Had I been blind to my daughter's silent pleas for years? I remembered conversations I had had with Emily in recent months. Her comments about how difficult marriage was, about how sometimes she felt she couldn't take it anymore, about how she envied the divorced women she knew. I had interpreted those comments as the normal complaints of a wife going through a rough patch with her husband. It never occurred to me that she was asking for help in the only way she dared. I also remembered changes in her behavior that I had attributed to other causes. Her refusal to wear tight or low-cut clothes, when she used to be very flirtatious. Her habit of showering with the bathroom door locked, when she used to be very relaxed about privacy. Her way of tensing up when Robert hugged her at family gatherings, something I had interpreted as shyness or bad mood. All the signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them because acknowledging them would have meant admitting that the man I had built my life with was a monster. When dawn broke on December 25th, Christmas Day, I made a decision. I couldn't confront Robert directly because he had all the advantages. The money, the property, the reputation, the power. But I could start documenting what was happening. I could seek professional help. I could find a way to protect Emily and Sarah without putting them in greater danger. Emily appeared in the kitchen around 8 in the morning to prepare Christmas breakfast. She had new bruises on her neck that she tried to cover with makeup and a light scarf. Her eyes were swollen and red. "Good morning, Mom," she said in a hoarse voice. "Good morning, honey." We stayed silent for a few minutes, her making coffee and me pretending to read the holiday newspaper. Finally, without looking up from the coffee maker, Emily whispered, "Mom, I need to tell you something." My heart sped up. Was my daughter finally going to confess what was happening? Was she going to ask for my help? "Tell me, honey." "I'm pregnant." The world stopped completely. Emily was pregnant. Chris had been working night shifts for 3 months without a single day off. Robert had been abusing her every night during that same period. "How far along?" I managed to ask in a trembling voice. 2.5 months, my daughter replied, and started crying inconsolably. At that moment, I knew this wasn't just a case of sexual abuse. It was much worse than that. My daughter was pregnant by her own father, The baby growing in her womb was the product of the systematic abuse Robert had been committing for months. And Chris, poor Chris, who worked double shifts to support his family, had no idea of the nightmare his wife was living. "Emily, look at me," I said, taking her hands. "You need to tell me exactly when all this started." My daughter lifted her face, and in her eyes I saw a mixture of shame, terror, and pleading that broke my soul. "It started when Chris got the night guard job, about 4 months ago. At first, Dad just came in to ask if I needed anything, if I was scared to be alone. He said it was his responsibility as the man of the house to look after the women when Chris wasn't around. And then he started staying longer. He'd bring me a glass of water, sit on the edge of my bed to chat. He told me Chris didn't value me, that a man who works nights can't satisfy his wife the way he should." Emily wiped her tears with the back of her hand, but they kept falling. "One night he told me I looked really tense, that I needed a massage to relax. I told him no, but he insisted. He said it was normal within the family, that he gave Mom massages all the time. That's a lie, Emily. Your father has never given me a massage in 35 years. I know that now, but at the time, I don't know, Mom. I felt so alone, so abandoned by Chris, so tired of everything. And Dad was very convincing. He said he loved me more than anyone in the world, that only he understood my needs." "When was the first time that?" 2.5 months ago, right after Chris started working weekends too to earn extra money for the holidays. The chronology fit perfectly. Chris working extra shifts, Robert taking advantage of that absence to abuse Emily, and now a pregnancy that could only be from my husband. "Emily, have you told Chris you're pregnant?" "No." "How can I tell him? He'll want to know exact dates. He'll start counting. He'll realize this can't be his. And what does your father plan to do about it?" Emily's expression changed, becoming even more terrified. "He says we have to tell Chris the baby is his. He says it's easy to convince men of these things, that they'll be so excited to be a dad they won't ask questions. And if Chris were to suspect something..." "What?" "Dad says he has contacts in the police who can fabricate domestic violence charges against Chris. He says he can get him thrown in jail, and I'd be left without a husband and without a way to support Sarah." Robert had thought of everything. He had a plan for every contingency, a threat for every person who might interfere with his absolute control over the family. He was more cunning and dangerous than I had imagined. "What else has he told you? That if I ever try to leave him or tell what's happening, he will make sure Sarah has an accident." He didn't say what kind of accident, but when he says it, his eyes look different, like he's truly capable of hurting her. At that moment, we heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Robert was heading toward the kitchen for his Christmas breakfast, acting as if it were a normal day in a normal family. Emily quickly dried her tears and started whisking eggs to make a special breakfast. "Good morning, my beautiful family," Robert said with that false, cheerful voice he had perfected for special occasions. "Merry Christmas." He approached Emily and gave her a kiss on the cheek that lasted too long, while placing his hand on my daughter's waist in a way that now made me nauseous. "How are you this morning, my girl? Did you sleep well after our little talk last night?" Emily visibly tensed but kept whisking the eggs without responding. "Carol, why don't you set the table? Today is a special day, and I want everything to be perfect." Robert poured himself coffee and sat in his usual chair, from where he could observe all our movements. He started reading the news on his phone, commenting cheerfully on the football scores and the government's plans for the next year, as if there wasn't a single worry in the world. When Sarah came down for breakfast dressed in her new Christmas pajamas, Robert completely changed his demeanor. He became the loving, protective grandfather all the neighbors knew. "There's my princess. Did you see the presents Santa brought?" Sarah smiled, but even her smile looked forced. My granddaughter had developed that ability that children living in dysfunctional homes have to read tense atmospheres and act accordingly. "Yes, Grandpa. Thank you. Aren't you going to give me a hug?" Sarah approached tentatively and gave him a quick hug. Robert held her for longer than necessary, stroking her hair in a way that made me feel sick. "You are a very special girl, Sarah. Very, very special." During breakfast, Robert monopolized the conversation, talking about the plans for the day. We would have visitors in the afternoon, my sister Lisa and her family, some neighbors, his friend Ed, and his wife. Everyone would come to wish us happy holidays and enjoy the Christmas dinner Emily had been preparing for days. "It's going to be a perfect Christmas," Robert said while spreading jam on his toast. "A celebration we'll remember forever." The irony of his words was unbearable. This was indeed going to be a Christmas we would remember forever, but not for the reasons he suggested. After breakfast, when Robert went out to the yard to check the Christmas lights he had installed to impress the neighbors, Emily approached me in desperation. "Mom, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending everything is okay. Last night he told me that after the baby is born, he's going to start training Sarah too. He says it's important for the women in the family to learn their role young." "Training? To be a good wife," he says. "To learn to please men the right way." My blood ran cold. Robert was planning to abuse Sarah too. My 11-year-old granddaughter was in the crosshairs of this predator, and I was the only one who could protect her. "Emily, listen to me closely. We are going to get out of this situation, but I need you to trust me completely." "How, Mom? He controls everything. The money, the house, he has friends in the police, he knows half the town. Who will believe us? Who will help us?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find a way. What I do know is that I won't let him lay a hand on Sarah. Mom, if we try to do something and he finds out, he'll kill us. He will literally kill us. I'd rather be dead than keep living in this nightmare." Emily looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face since she was a child. Hope. For the first time in months, my daughter saw the possibility that someone would protect her, that someone would fight for her. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "For now, act normal. Survive this day. Smile for the visitors. Act like the perfect mother and wife you've always been. But in the meantime, I'll be watching everything, documenting everything, looking for a way to get help. And if Robert suspects something, he won't suspect a thing, because he'll be too busy acting for the visitors. Today is the perfect day for me to start moving without him noticing." At noon, the first visitors started arriving. The house filled with cheerful voices, laughter, Christmas greetings. The neighbors praised the decorations. The women helped Emily in the kitchen. The men talked with Robert about politics and sports. Everything looked like a perfect Christmas postcard, but I could no longer participate in that farce. Every smile Robert directed at the guests seemed like a devilish mask. Every compliment he received for being such a good father and grandfather sounded like a cruel mockery of fate. During the meal, while everyone toasted to family and happiness, Robert raised his glass and proposed a special toast. "To my wife Carol, who has been the pillar of this family for so many years. To my daughter Emily, who is going to give us the joy of a new baby next year. And to my granddaughter Sarah, who is growing up to be a beautiful and special woman." Everyone applauded and raised their glasses. No one noticed that I didn't raise mine. No one realized that Emily paled when Robert mentioned her pregnancy. No one saw how Sarah flinched when her grandfather spoke of her. In that moment, I made a definitive decision. I was not going to allow Robert to continue destroying my family one more day. That same night, when the visitors left and the house returned to its horrible normalcy, I was going to act. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew I had to. At 10 o'clock that night, when the last visitor said goodbye and the house was plunged into that false quietness that had become so familiar, I knew the time had come to act. Robert was in the living room finishing a beer while watching the late news, satisfied with the success of his Christmas performance. Emily had gone upstairs to put Sarah to bed, and I stayed in the kitchen doing the dishes. But I was really organizing my plan. During the hours the visitors stayed, I had been observing and memorizing everything. The way Robert touched Emily when he thought no one was looking, running his hand possessively over her lower back. How he had hugged Sarah for too long when she said goodnight, whispering something in her ear that made her visibly uncomfortable. The way he managed conversations, directing attention to himself, creating that image of a respectable patriarch he used as a shield for his crimes. But I had also noticed something else. Robert had been drinking more than usual. During the meal, he had several glasses of scotch, then beers, and finally, brandy with the male guests. He was relaxed, confident, less alert than usual. If I was going to do something, this was my opportunity. Emily came down after putting Sarah to bed. her eyes swollen from crying throughout the day. She approached me in the kitchen and started drying the dishes in silence. "How is Sarah?" I asked in a low voice. "Nervous." She asked me why all the adults seem to be acting today. She says she feels like she's living in a stage play where she's the only one who doesn't know her part. She's a very smart child. Too smart. I'm afraid Robert will realize how much she observes and understands. We finished the dishes in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we were putting away the last plates, Emily grabbed my arm. "Mom, last night he told me something that terrifies me." "What?" "That after the baby is born, he's going to start taking Sarah on special outings. He says it's important for her to get to know the real world, not to be a naive child her whole life." "Outings where?" "He wouldn't tell me, but the way he said it, the smile he gave." "Mom, I think he already has a plan for where and how he's going to start abusing her." At that moment, we heard Robert's voice from the living room. "Emily, come here." My daughter froze. It was the same voice he used every night when he called her for their private meetings. But this time, it was earlier, more impatient. "Emily." "Mom, I can't," my daughter whispered. "I can't go in there again. Not after knowing I'm pregnant by him. I can't keep pretending this is okay. Go, act normal." "I'm going to do something." "What are you going to do?" "Trust me." Emily walked toward the living room with slow steps, like a woman condemned. I stayed in the kitchen, but I strained my ears to hear what was happening. "Sit here with me," I heard Robert say. "I want to talk to you about our plans for next year." "What plans?" "For the baby, of course. We'll have to be very careful with the timing, the dates, what we tell Chris. But don't worry, I'll take care of everything." "Robert, I don't want to." "You don't want what? You don't want your own child? You don't want the blessing God is giving us?" The way Robert spoke of the pregnancy, as if it were a divine gift instead of the result of his crimes, turned my stomach. But it also gave me the clarity I needed. This man was completely disconnected from reality. In his twisted mind, he had managed to convince himself that what he was doing was right, even virtuous. "Besides," he continued, "we have to talk about Sarah. She's old enough to start learning certain things about life. And who better than her grandfather to teach her?" "No," Emily said with a firmness she hadn't shown in months. "You are not touching Sarah." "Excuse me? Are you giving me orders?" "I'm telling you not to lay a hand on my daughter." The silence that followed was so tense I could feel it from the kitchen. Then I heard the sound of a slap, followed by a muffled whimper from Emily. "Don't talk to me like that, brat. I decide what happens in this house and with whom. And if I decide Sarah needs a certain kind of education, that is exactly what she will get." "Robert, please." "No, please. You've served your purpose, Emily. You gave me the son I needed. Now it's Sarah's turn to learn her family responsibilities." I couldn't listen anymore. I walked silently to the drawer where we kept the kitchen knives. I took the largest one, the one we used to carve the roast for special meals. I hid it in the folds of my apron and walked into the living room. Robert had Emily sitting on his lap, one hand on her chest and the other stroking the belly where the baby was growing. My daughter was crying silently, her face red from the slap she had just received. "Robert," I said calmly. He turned toward me with annoyance without letting go of Emily. "What do you want, Carol? We're having a private conversation." "I want you to let go of my daughter." "Or what?" I pulled the knife from the folds of the apron and held it firmly in my right hand. "Or I'll kill you." Robert laughed, but his laugh sounded nervous. He didn't expect this reaction from me. "You? You're going to kill me?" "Carol, don't be ridiculous. You couldn't even kill a mouse." "You're right. Under normal circumstances, I couldn't. But these are not normal circumstances. This is a mother protecting her daughter and her granddaughter from a monster. Put that damn thing down and go to sleep. It's late, and tomorrow you have to clean up the mess the visitors left." Robert continued stroking Emily, challenging me with his dismissive attitude. He thought I was too cowardly, too dependent, too weak to do anything truly drastic. He was wrong. "Emily, get up and go to your room. Lock the door." My daughter looked at me with terror and confusion, but she obeyed. She got up from Robert's lap and ran toward the stairs. "Emily, come back here immediately," Robert shouted, standing up. "No," I said, placing myself between him and the stairs. "You are never going to touch her again." "Carol, you are making a very serious mistake." Put that knife down before you do something you'll regret for the rest of your life. You know what I regret, Robert? Being blind for so many years. Trusting you. Not protecting my daughter when you started abusing her. I'm not abusing anyone. Emily is an adult woman who makes her own choices. Emily is your daughter, and she's pregnant by you. You can't prove that. I don't need to prove it. I know it's true, you know it's true, and Emily knows it's true, and I won't allow you to do the same to Sarah. Robert changed tactics. His expression softened, adopting the manipulative tone he had perfected for decades. Carol, my love, you are very confused. These have been stressful days, with the holidays, with the visitors. You're imagining things that don't exist. I'm not imagining anything. Of course you are. Think about it. Do you really believe I would be capable of hurting my own daughter? My granddaughter? I'm your husband, Carol. The man who has loved you for 35 years. The man who has lied to me for 35 years. Robert stepped closer, and I raised the knife, pointing it directly toward his chest. Don't come any closer. Carol, think about what you're doing. If you hurt me, if you kill me, what will happen to you? To Emily? To Sarah? You'll go to jail. You'll destroy the whole family. The family is already destroyed, Robert. You destroyed it. I have maintained this family for decades. I have worked day and night to give you a house, food, education, and this is how you repay me? Threatening me with a knife in my own living room? Your own living room? This house was bought with my parents' inheritance money. Money you convinced me to put in your name to have total control over our lives. Robert was silent for a moment, calculating his next move. Fine, he finally said. You're right. I've made mistakes. I've done things I shouldn't have. But we can fix this, Carol. We can go to family therapy. We can talk to Father Michael. We can find a way to solve our problems. The only way to solve this problem is for you to stay away from Emily and Sarah forever. I can't do that. They are my family. Not anymore. At that moment, we heard footsteps on the stairs. It was Sarah, coming down in her pajamas, looking terrified. Grandma, what's happening? I heard yelling. Robert took advantage of the distraction to take a step toward me, but I kept the knife steady. Sarah, go back to your room immediately, I said without taking my eyes off Robert. Grandma, why do you have a knife? Sarah, come here with me, Robert said sweetly. Your grandmother is a little sick, but I'll protect you. My granddaughter froze on the bottom step, watching the scene without fully understanding what was happening, but instinctively feeling that something was terribly wrong. Sarah, I said with all the firmness I could muster, trust me. Go up to your room and don't come out until I tell you. Sarah, come here, Robert insisted. Now. My granddaughter looked into my eyes, then looked at Robert, then looked back at me. In her face, I saw the decision forming. I'm calling my dad, she said, and ran back up the stairs. Robert lunged toward the stairs to follow her, but I blocked his way. The knife grazed his shirt, tearing the fabric. Carol, stop playing games. This isn't a game, Robert. This is the end. Robert stepped back when he saw the blood on his shirt, but his eyes filled with a rage I had never seen before. He was no longer the manipulative, calculating man of the last few days. He was a cornered beast that had been discovered and now showed his true fangs. Carol, you have just made the biggest mistake of your life, he said in a guttural voice that made my skin crawl. No, Robert. The biggest mistake of my life was marrying you. From upstairs, we heard Sarah's desperate voice on the phone. Dad, come quick. Grandma has a knife and Grandpa is yelling and Mom is crying. Robert used my momentary distraction upon hearing Sarah to pounce on me. He was stronger and faster than I had calculated. He grabbed the wrist holding the knife and started twisting it with brutal force. Drop it, you stupid old woman, he snarled as we fought for the weapon. But 35 years of pent-up rage gave me a strength I didn't even know I had. I managed to maintain my grip on the knife while Robert tried to take it from me. We rolled across the living room floor, overturning the coffee table, breaking the Christmas ornaments that had been decorating our family farce. Mom! Emily screamed from the top of the stairs. Mom! Watch out! Robert managed to get on top of me, using his weight to pin me down. His face was inches from mine, and I could see something in his eyes that made me understand this fight wouldn't end until one of us was dead. 35 years I supported you, he spat as he kept trying to take the knife. 35 years I gave you a house, food, respect, and this is how you repay me. Like all women, you are ungrateful. 35 years I was your slave, I replied, feeling his fingers hurting my wrist. 35 years I believed your lies, but no more. At that moment, we heard the tires of a car screeching to a halt outside the house. It was Chris, who had rushed home from work when Sarah called him. Seconds later, we heard his footsteps running toward the front door. Emily! Sarah! What is going on? Robert was distracted for a moment hearing Chris's voice, and I took the opportunity to push him with all my strength. I didn't manage to throw him off completely, but I did manage to free my hand from the knife. Chris burst into the living room and froze at the sight. His father-in-law and mother-in-law fighting on the floor, overturned furniture, broken ornaments, blood on Robert's shirt. What the hell is going on here? Chris, help me, I yelled. Robert is abusing Emily. He's been abusing her for months. Robert took advantage of my distraction to punch me in the face, which left me stunned. He got off the floor and walked toward Chris with his hands up in a gesture of surrender. Chris, buddy, don't listen to Carol. She's having a nervous breakdown. She attacked me with a knife for no reason. Chris looked at the knife lying on the floor, then looked at me with my face swollen from the punch, then looked at Robert with his shirt torn and stained with blood. Emily, he yelled toward the stairs. Emily, get down here immediately. My daughter appeared at the top of the stairs with Sarah holding her hand. They came down slowly, both visibly trembling. Emily, tell me what's happening, and I want the truth. My daughter looked at Robert, then looked at me, then looked at her husband. I saw in her eyes the internal battle she was fighting. Fear against hope, resignation against the possibility of salvation. Chris, she began in a trembling voice. Don't say anything, Robert shouted at her. Don't say another word. Emily, Chris said with a firmness I hadn't heard from him before. Look at me, only at me, and tell me what's been happening in this house. Emily let go of Sarah's hand and started walking down the stairs toward her husband. With every step she took, her expression changed. The terrified victim she had been for months began to transform into a woman who finally saw a way out. Chris, my dad has been raping me for 4 months. The silence that followed that confession was absolute. Chris stood motionless, processing words his brain refused to accept. Robert turned completely pale, knowing his world had just collapsed. Sarah, from the top of the stairs, started crying, not fully understanding what was happening, but feeling that something terrible had just been revealed. What? Chris whispered. Since you started working nights. He comes to my room, forces me to. He threatens to hurt Sarah if I don't let him. And now I'm pregnant by him. Chris turned toward Robert with an expression I had never seen on his face. It was pure, concentrated, lethal fury. Is that true? Robert tried to maintain his facade of innocence for one more moment. Chris, you can't believe these crazy stories. The women in this family are hysterical. They're making up. He couldn't finish the sentence because Chris lunged at him with the speed of lightning. The punch he threw sent Robert slamming against the wall so hard that several framed pictures fell to the floor. Robert tried to get up, but Chris grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. You put your hands on my wife? Chris, wait. You put your hands on my wife? I can explain. Chris slammed him against the wall again. Robert started bleeding from his nose, but Chris wasn't finished with him. And you got her pregnant? Chris, please. Answer me. Robert, feeling the life draining out of him in Chris's hands, finally broke. She wanted it. She came on to me. She was lonely. She needed a real man. It was the worst thing he could have said. Chris let go of him only to punch him better. He delivered a series of rapid punches to his face and stomach that would have killed a weaker man. Dad, Emily screamed. Chris, stop. You'll kill him. But Chris was in a state of blind rage. 30 years of working security, of dealing with criminals and violent situations, had taught him how to use his fists efficiently. And now he was unleashing all that experience on the man who had violated his wife. Chris, I yelled. Stop. It's not worth going to jail for this animal. Chris paused, breathing like a wounded bull, his knuckles bleeding and Robert unconscious at his feet. "Emily," he said without turning to look at her, "take Sarah and go pack your things. We are leaving this house tonight. Where are we going?" "Anywhere that is far from this son of a bitch." Emily ran upstairs with Sarah. I stayed in the living room with Chris, looking at Robert, who was breathing heavily but still alive. "Chris, there's something else you need to know," I said. "What?" Robert was planning to start abusing Sarah too. Chris turned toward Robert with the intention of hitting him again, but I stopped him. "No, Chris, he's unconscious. And we need to think about what we're going to do now. I'm calling the police. Robert claims he has contacts in the police force. He says he can fabricate charges against you, have you thrown in jail." Chris paused for a moment, evaluating our options. "Then we leave tonight. We grab what we can carry and we get out of here. Tomorrow, from another city, we file the report. What about me?" Chris looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret at first. Then I understood. He was evaluating whether I had been an accomplice or a victim. "Carol, how long did you know what was happening?" "I realized 3 days ago, December 22nd. Before that, I had no idea." "And why didn't you say anything until now?" "Because he threatened to hurt Sarah. And because I was afraid no one would believe me." Chris nodded, understanding the impossible situation I had found myself in. "You're coming with us. Robert can't keep all the assets you helped build over so many years." Emily and Sarah came downstairs with 2 suitcases packed with clothes and important documents. My granddaughter's eyes were red from crying, but her face showed more relief than sadness. "Grandma, are you coming with us?" she asked me. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm going with you." "And Grandpa Robert?" I looked toward where Robert was lying on the floor. He had started to regain consciousness and looked at us with pure hatred. "Grandpa Robert is no longer part of our family." Chris grabbed the suitcases and we headed for the door. Before stepping outside, I turned one last time toward the man who had been my husband for 35 years. "Robert, when you fully wake up, I suggest you don't try to follow us. Because the next time you find us, I won't stop Chris. And I won't leave the knife on the floor." We left the house, closing the door behind us. It was December 26th, 2 in the morning. It was cold, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. I didn't know what awaited us. I didn't know how we were going to rebuild our lives after so much damage. But I knew we had finally escaped hell, and that was enough to start. We drove for 3 hours without a fixed destination, just putting distance between us and the town as Sarah slept in the back seat and Emily cried silently. Chris drove with a tension reflected in his white knuckles gripping the steering wheel, stopping only for gas and coffee at a lonely truck stop on the highway heading south. "Where are we going?" I asked him when he finally stopped at a roadside motel that looked clean and discreet. "For now here. We'll see tomorrow." We rented 2 adjoining rooms, Chris and Emily in one, Sarah and I in the other. For the first time in months, my granddaughter and I could talk without Robert's threatening shadow lurking over every word. "Grandma, is Grandpa Robert mean?" Sarah was sitting on the motel bed, wearing the teddy bear pajamas she had packed in her haste to leave home. Despite everything she had witnessed, she was still an 11-year-old girl trying to understand an adult world that had become incomprehensible. "Yes, sweetheart, he is very mean." "Is that why you had the knife?" "Because I had to protect you. You and your mom." "Was he hurting Mom?" I sat on the bed next to her, trying to find the right words to explain a situation that even adults couldn't fully process. "Grandpa Robert did very ugly things to your mom. Things a dad should never do to his daughter, and he threatened us so we wouldn't say anything." Was he going to do ugly things to me too? The question broke my heart because it confirmed that Sarah had understood more than any of us had imagined. He was going to try, but he won't be able to anymore. Never again. Because we left? Because we left? And because now he knows we are no longer willing to stay silent. Sarah snuggled against me, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could hug her without fear, without having to be alert in case Robert appeared to interrupt our moment of affection. "Grandma, are we not going to live in our house anymore?" "No, sweetheart. We're going to get a new house. A house where only we live, where no one hurts us. And will Grandpa Robert be alone?" "Yes." "Good," she said with a surprising firmness. "I never want to see him again." The next day, Chris went out early to make phone calls from a public phone at the truck stop. When he returned, he brought news that completely changed our future. My brother Jake lives in San Diego, he told us while we ate breakfast at a family restaurant near the motel. He runs a tourism business, kayak rentals and beach tours. He offered me a job immediately when I told him the situation. Does he know the whole story? Emily asked. I told him the essentials. That Robert was abusing you. That we had to flee. That we need to start over. And what did he say? That in San Diego, there are many families who came escaping difficult situations. That no one asks indiscreet questions. And that he has a small apartment where we can stay while we find something permanent. San Diego. I had only been there once, on our honeymoon with Robert 35 years ago. I remembered the golden beaches, the salty air, the feeling of freedom that came from being near the ocean. Now, the idea of living there felt like a chance to be reborn. What about the pregnancy? Emily asked. What am I going to do about the baby? It was the question we had all been avoiding. My daughter was 2.5 months pregnant by her own father. The baby growing in her womb was the product of rape and incest, but it was also an innocent life that bore no fault for the circumstances of its conception. Emily, I said, taking her hand, that is a decision only you can make. Chris and I will support you in whatever you choose. Chris nodded, although I saw the internal struggle he was fighting in his eyes. He was a good man who had married a woman he loved, and now he had to deal with the fact that she was pregnant by her own father. I need time to think, Emily said. But first, I need to be in a safe place where I can think clearly. San Diego will be that place, Chris assured her. That afternoon, while Sarah took a nap and Chris made more calls to arrange our relocation, Emily and I had the most honest conversation of our lives. Mom, how didn't you realize sooner? How could you live in the same house and not see what was happening? The question I had been dreading since we left. The question I had asked myself hundreds of times over the past 72 hours. I don't know, honey. I think I didn't want to see it. I think it was easier to pretend everything was fine than to face the possibility that the man I had built my life with was a monster. But there were signs. There had to be. There were. Your way of tensing up when he touched you. Your refusal to wear certain clothes. Your comments about how difficult marriage was. But I interpreted all of that as normal problems. Not as cries for help. Emily cried. And I cried with her. We cried for the months of suffering we could have avoided if I had been more observant, braver, more willing to face uncomfortable truths. But the important thing, I continued, is that I finally found out. And that we acted. And that now we are free. Are we really free, Mom? Or will Robert find a way to keep controlling our lives from afar? It was a valid concern. Robert knew our full names, our identification numbers. He had access to our bank accounts. If he wanted to find us, he probably could. That's why we're changing everything, I told her. Chris has already spoken to an attorney in San Diego who specializes in domestic violence cases. We are going to file formal reports, get restraining orders, open new bank accounts. We are going to create a new legal identity that protects us. What about the money? The house? Everything we left behind? Honey, material things can be replaced. You can't. Sarah can't. Our safety and peace of mind are priceless. Emily was silent for a moment, processing everything we had lost and everything we had gained. Mom, there's something else I need to tell you. Tell me. The night before we left, Robert told me he had already started to prepare Sarah, that he had been touching her accidentally over the last few weeks to get her used to his contact. I felt the world collapsing again. Had Robert already started abusing Sarah? Had my granddaughter been suffering in silence just like her mother? Have you asked her? I don't dare. I'm afraid of the answer. Emily, we have to know. If Robert has already touched her, Sarah needs psychological help immediately. That night, after dinner at the same family restaurant, I decided to talk to Sarah directly. I took her for a walk in the motel parking lot, where no one could overhear our conversation. Sarah, I need to ask you something very important, and I need you to tell me the complete truth. Okay, Grandma. Did Grandpa Robert ever touch you in a way that made you feel uncomfortable? Did he touch you on parts of your body he shouldn't? Sarah stopped dead in her tracks and looked at me with those big eyes that reflected premature wisdom. Yes, she whispered. When? Where? When you and Mom weren't around, he told me he was going to teach me important things about being a woman. He touched me here, she said, pointing to her chest. And here, pointing between her legs. He told me it was normal, that all grandpas did that with their granddaughters. Anything else? He made me touch his thing. He told me it was a special secret between us, that if I told anyone, he would hurt you and Mom. My 11-year-old granddaughter had been sexually abused by Robert, and I hadn't realized it. I had failed as a mother and a grandmother in the most fundamental way possible. Sarah, sweetheart, nothing Grandpa Robert did to you was normal. None of that should have happened, and it wasn't your fault. It wasn't. No, it was never, ever your fault. Adults are responsible for protecting children, not hurting them. Is that why Dad hit him? One of the reasons. Yes. I'm glad. Sarah, is there anything else you need to tell me? Anything else Robert did to you? No, but he told me that when I turned 12, he was going to teach me more important things. I was really scared of turning 12. I couldn't sleep that night. My family had been living in a house of horror for months, and I had been too blind to see it. Robert had not only abused Emily, but had already started abusing Sarah. If we hadn't escaped when we did, what would have happened when my granddaughter turned 12? But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. We had escaped. We were alive. We were together. And for the first time in months, we could plan a future that didn't include fear, secrets, or suffering. The next day, we took a bus to San Diego. As the landscape of mountains and desert gradually transformed into palm trees and ocean, I felt like we were leaving behind more than just a town. We were leaving behind a version of ourselves that had been defined by trauma and victimization. When we finally arrived in San Diego and I breathed in the salty Pacific air, I knew we had found the place where we could begin to heal. 6 months later, as the sun set over San Diego Bay, painting the sky in golden and pink colors, I found myself sitting on the deck of our new house with a steaming cup of coffee in my hands, watching Sarah play on the beach with other neighborhood children. For the first time in decades, her laughter sounded genuine, free from the tension that had marked her last months back home. The house we had found was small but bright, with large windows that let in the sea breeze and walls painted in cheerful colors that Emily had chosen during her better days. Chris worked from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon at his brother's business, organizing kayak tours and fishing excursions for tourists looking for tropical adventures. He liked the job because it allowed him to be outdoors and get home early to spend the afternoons with his family. Emily had made the hardest decision of her life 2 weeks after arriving in San Diego. After speaking with counselors, social workers, and a pastor who specialized in supporting women in crisis, she decided to terminate the pregnancy. She couldn't raise a child who was the product of her own father's abuse. She couldn't explain the circumstances of its conception to that innocent baby. And she couldn't risk Robert claiming rights over the child in the future. It was a decision that emotionally devastated her for months, but it also freed her. Chris supported her throughout the process without reproach or judgment, demonstrating that true love is not measured by perfect circumstances, but by the ability to be present during the darkest times. "What are you thinking, Carol?" Chris asked me, coming onto the deck after his evening shower. He had started calling me Carol instead of Mrs. Miller after our shared experience, as a way to confirm I was an integral part of his new nuclear family. "I'm thinking about how different life feels when you're not afraid," I replied. "Did you know that for years I couldn't enjoy a sunset because I was always worried about what mood Robert would be in when night came?" Chris sat in the chair next to mine, drying his hair with a towel. At 42, he had found a tranquility he didn't have back home. The physical work on the beach had put him in better shape, but more importantly, he no longer had that constant tension in his shoulders that came from living in a house where something was always wrong without knowing exactly what. "Have you heard anything about him?" he asked me. During the first 3 months after our escape, Robert had tried to contact us in every possible way. Phone calls to numbers he knew, messages through my sister Lisa. He had even hired a private investigator to try to find us. But the attorney Chris had hired in San Diego had done an excellent job ensuring all our documents were protected and that any attempted harassment was documented for future legal action. "Lisa wrote to me last week," I said. She says Robert sold the house and moved to Las Vegas. Apparently, he told everyone we had gone crazy and run off with an imaginary lover. Do people believe him? Those who know him superficially, probably yes. But Lisa says some neighbors who knew us well started asking questions. They remembered strange things they had seen but never questioned. Chris nodded, taking a drink of the beer he had poured himself. And you? How do you feel knowing he's telling that version of the story? At first I was furious, I admitted. 35 years of marriage reduced to his wife going crazy. But then I realized something. I don't care what Robert says about me anymore. I don't care what people who never bothered to truly know me think. That's a huge change. It's the biggest change of my life. Emily came out of the house with a tray of fresh quesadillas and iced hibiscus tea. She had cut her hair in a more modern style and had started wearing brighter colors after years of dressing conservatively to avoid Robert's attention. At 32, she seemed to have regained a youth she had lost during the months of abuse. Sarah wants to know if she can stay at Maria's house tonight, she said while serving the food. They're having a sleepover to celebrate her younger sister's birthday. How do you feel about that? Chris asked her. During the first months in San Diego, Emily had developed severe anxiety whenever Sarah was out of her sight. The months of living with the constant threat of Robert hurting her daughter had created a state of hypervigilance that took time to overcome, but psychological therapy and months of peaceful living had begun to heal those wounds. I feel good, she replied with a genuine smile. Maria has a very normal family. Parents who work, grandparents who actually act like grandparents, siblings who fight over normal sibling things. Sarah needs to see how a healthy family works. And how is she doing in therapy? Better. Much better. Dr. Chavez says children are more resilient than we think, especially when they feel safe to process what happened to them. Sarah had started therapy 2 weeks after our arrival. At first, she resisted talking about Robert, but she had gradually started to open up about her experiences. Dr. Chavez, a child trauma specialist, had explained to us that the fact Sarah had adults who protected her as soon as they learned of the abuse had made an enormous difference in her ability to recover. You know what she told me yesterday? Emily continued. She said she doesn't have nightmares about Robert anymore. When she dreams about him, in the dream, she's bigger and stronger, and she can yell at him to go away. That's a very good sign, Chris said, and she asked me if we could get a dog. The three of us laughed. It was so normal, so typically childish, that I felt as if we were finally living the life we should have always had. A dog? I asked. She says she wants something that is just hers, something no one else can touch or control, something that loves her unconditionally without asking anything in return. I think that's perfect, Chris said. We can go to the animal shelter this weekend. As we ate dinner on the deck with the sound of the waves as background music, I reflected on everything we had lost and everything we had gained during these 6 months. We had lost a house, life savings, the economic security that comes from having everything planned. But we had gained something infinitely more valuable, the ability to sleep peacefully, to hug without fear, to plan the future without the shadow of a threat. Mom, Emily said as we collected the plates, there's something I want to tell you. Tell me, honey. Thank you for saving me. Emily, no, let me say it. For months I thought I was going to die in that situation. Not literally, but spiritually. I felt like every day Robert killed a little bit more of me inside. And you saved me. We saved each other. But you were the one who risked it first. You were the one who grabbed the knife. You were the one who decided we couldn't keep living like this anymore. Any mother would have done the same. That's not true, and you know it. Many women would have stayed silent forever, thinking they had no options. That night, after Chris and Emily went to sleep and Sarah had gone to her sleepover, I stayed alone on the deck, looking at the stars reflected in the dark ocean water. For the first time in decades, the silence of the night didn't scare me. There were no threatening footsteps, no doors opening without permission, no manipulative whispers in the darkness. I thought of all the women who were currently living in situations similar to ours. Women who wake up every morning pretending everything is fine, who smile for visitors while dying inside, who protect predators for fear of the consequences of speaking up. I thought of all the grandmothers who might be in my situation, living under the same roof as an abuser, financially dependent on him, not knowing how to protect their families without destroying the stability they have built over decades. And I understood that my story wasn't just mine. It was the story of thousands of women who needed to hear that, yes, you can escape. Yes, you can start over. That age is not a limitation to standing up for what is right. The next day, Sarah returned from her sleepover with renewed energy and stories about movies they had watched and games they had played. During breakfast, she told me she had told Maria and her sisters that she used to live with a bad grandpa, but now she lived with a family that truly loved her. And what did they say? I asked her. That I was really brave for talking about it, and that Maria also had a mean uncle, but her parents never let him come to their house. How did it feel to tell them? Good. Like it was a story that happened to another girl, not me. That afternoon, Chris came home from work with exciting news. His brother Jake had decided to expand the business and offered him a minority partnership in a new ecotourism company that would include whale-watching tours and nature reserve excursions. It would be more money, he explained during dinner, and more responsibility too. But we could buy a bigger house, save for Sarah's college, have more economic stability. What do you think, Emily? I asked my daughter. I think Chris deserves every opportunity in the world. He's been a hero to this family. What about you? Have you thought about what you want to do professionally? Emily had started taking baking classes at a local technical institute. She had always been good at cooking, but now she was learning professional techniques with the idea of eventually opening a small business selling cakes and desserts for events. I want to be financially independent, she said. I want Sarah to see that women can support themselves, that we never have to depend on a man to survive again. That's a very important lesson. But I also want her to see that there are good men, she continued, looking at Chris with genuine love, that not all men are like Robert. That true love exists, and it looks like what Chris and I have now. That night, before sleeping, I wrote a letter I would never send to all the women who might be living what we lived. If you are reading this and feel like your story resembles mine, I want you to know that you are not crazy. What you are feeling is real. What is happening in your house is not normal. And yes, there is a way out. It won't be easy. It will require courage you didn't know you had. It will mean losing things you thought were important, but it will give you something infinitely more valuable: your dignity, your peace, and the chance to protect the people you truly love. No matter your age, no matter how long you have been silent, no matter how powerful the man hurting you seems, it is never too late to say, no more. Seek help. Talk to someone you trust. Make a plan. And when the time comes, act. Because women are stronger than they have taught us to believe. Now, as the sun sets on the horizon and a new night arrives without fear, I have a question for you. Have you ever experienced a similar situation? Or do you know someone who has gone through something similar? Tell me in the comments. Your story could be the one that saves another family. And if this story moved you, if you think someone else needs to hear it, like and subscribe so this message reaches those who really need it. Because together we are stronger, and together we can break all the silences that have kept us prisoner.